Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 24 Secularization, we start our lecture with topic the Constitution and Secularism. Indian Constitution is a creative blend of state secularism and religiosity of the civic society. The Indian Constitution treats all citizens equal, irrespective of caste, creed, race, sex, or religion. Article 14 guarantees equality before law. It says the state shall not deny to any person equality before the law or the equal protection of the laws within the territory of India. Article 15 says the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on ground only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. No citizen shall on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them be subject to any disability, liability, restriction, or condition with regard to access to shops, public restaurants, hotels, and places of public entertainment, or the use of wells, tanks, bathing, roads, and places of public resort maintained wholly or partially out of the state funds or dedicated to the use of the general public. Thus, the article does away with caste discrimination, and Article 16 guarantees equality of opportunity in matters of employment. Articles 25 to 30 guarantee freedom of religion, of culture and language. Article 30 also guarantees to minorities the right to establish their own educational institutions. These articles from 25 to 30 are extremely significant as far as minority rights are concerned. The minorities could not be religious or linguistic. Though our constitution is secular, originally the word secularism did not occur in it. It was during the emergency in the mid 1970s that the word secular and socialist were added, and India was described as secular and socialist republic. But the words secularism or secular were not defined. According to H.M. Shirvai, Constitutional Law of India, realizing that the word secular and socialist required to be defined, the 45th Amendment Bill, which became the 44th Amendment, proposed an amendment of Article 366 by inserting definitions of the word secular and socialist. However, this amendment was not accepted by the Council of States. Consequently, the words secular and socialist have remained undefined. But a footnote to this gives the proposed amendment and defines secularism thus. Article 366 of Constitution shall be renumbered as Clause 2 of that article, and before Clause 2 as so numbered, the following clauses shall be inserted, namely: 1. In the preamble to the Constitution and expression secular meanings to republic, in which there is equal respect for all religions. Thus we see the word secular and secularism remain undefined in the Indian Constitution. Secularism in the Indian Constitution connotates that the state by itself shall not espouse or establish or practice any religion. Public revenues will not be used to promote any religion. The state shall have the power to regulate any economic, financial, or other secular activity associated with religious practice, Article 25(2) of the Constitution. The state shall have the power through the law to provide for social welfare and reform or throwing open of Hindu religious institution of public character to all classes and sections of Hindus. Article 25(2)(b) of the Constitution. The practice of untouchability in so far as it may be justified by the Hindu religion is constitutionally outlawed by Article 17. Every individual person will have in that order an equal right to freedom of conscience and religion. These rights are, however, subject to the power of the state through law to impose restrictions on the ground of public order, morality, and health. These rights are furthermore subject to other fundamental rights in Part 3, and the courts, especially the Supreme Court, shall have the say on the adjudging the state action as valid or otherwise under the above principles. By this time, the 9 features of secularism has marshalled behind them a quarter century of national constitutional consensus. To these 9 features have been now added since 1976 a fundamental duty of all citizens under Article 51AF to preserve the rich heritage of our composition culture. This duty is addressed to all citizens, including leaders of political parties and all holders of the state power, and it is declared their fundamental obligation. Neither political practices nor practices of power, including judicial power, will be legitimate if they contradict this duty. The Constitution has undoubtedly erected a wall of separation between the state and religion. While there are no doors opening from the side of religion into the state, there are, however, several doors opening from the side of the state into the religion. If the interests of public order, morality, and health so demand, the rights to profess, practice, and propagate religion may be breached. So also the right of a religious domination to manage its own affair in the matter pertaining to religion. The right to profess, practice, and propagate religion may also be breached if the enforcement of other fundamental rights require it, or if the demands of the social welfare and reform require it. Thus, the Constitution contemplates and compels the supremacy of secular authority and secular interest over religious authority and religious interest. We see therefore that secularism under the Constitution is an attitude and a way of life partly commanded and partly commended by the Constitution, embodying a system of values in which the relation between fellow human beings and between the state and citizens are freed from the bondage of the prejudices and loyalties of religion, race, caste, language, and reason, and are ruled by a mutual concern for a life with dignity and culture, for a society where everyone is free and equal, and in which science and reason trump over superstitious and blind belief, and love of humanity over love of any particular section thereof. Now let us conclude the unit. In sum, the concept of secularism that emerged in India possessed 3 substantial components. The state would not attach itself to any one religion. which would thereby establish as the state religion. All citizens had the freedom of religious belief. The state would ensure equality among religious groups by ensuring that one group was not favored at the expense of others. Correspondingly, the minorities were reassured that they would not be discriminated against in any way. Therefore, in the first instance, secularism was designed to regulate debilitating religious strife, to assure the minorities of their safety, and to set at rest any apprehension that the state would align itself with the dominant religion. In retrospect, it is not surprising that the secularism proved to be attractive to Indian leadership. For one, secularism had historically emerged in the West as a formula to put an end to the religious wars that has devastated Europe in the 16th century. It was on the principle of secularism that communities that had gone to war over religion and societies that had tortured non-believers throughout the period of the Inquisition could learn to live together. India faced similar problems. The anti-colonial struggle had provoked separate and potentially divisive communities to define themselves not only in opposition to colonialism but also in opposition to each other. This posed a distinct threat to the cohesion of the new nation. The articulation of the principle of secularism, a principle that was strictly outside the ideological formulation of these identities, was designed to allow people to live together in civility. This is what contemporary critics of secularism seem to forget. In sum, for India, the attraction of secularism lay in the fact that it was the only prudent option for constructing a nation out of the fragmented and polarized identities that had emerged and consolidated themselves during the colonial and the anti-colonial phase. In India, where two new nations had materialized out of a blood-drenched partition, that is, the India and Pakistan, the need was to forget that people who shared the same historical consciousness, the same language, and the same folklore for centuries had split over a religion. The need was to integrate these divided people on new ideologies, new perspectives, new issues. This issue could only be secularism, since it gave due recognition to religious identities and yet attempted to transcend them as far as the public sphere was concerned. The state could not refuse to recognize the religious identities of its people. That would have bad politics and bad historical understanding. What it could do was to stipulate that all religions were in principle equal. Here we want to close this lecture and we have come to the end of the unit. Thanks for so patientful hearing.